figure out how to run her off.
Okay, just say your name and tell me what you do.
I'm Dale Wainwright. I'm the chair of the Texas Appellate Practice Group for the law firm of Greenberg Traurig. I also am chair of the board of the Texas Board of Criminal Justice, which oversees the Texas Department of Criminal Justice.
And where were you born and raised?
I was born and raised in Mount Juliet, Tennessee. Born Juneteenth, 1961.
And growing up, siblings?
Yep, 2 sisters and a brother. I'm the second oldest.
And what was life growing up in Tennessee?
It was fun. It was before the technological age, so in the summers we'd go exploring through the woods and catch crawdads in the streams and hang out with friends, ride our bikes. Dad worked hourly for DuPont Chemical for 27 years before he died. He was also the pastor of our church, and he was fire and brimstone, not rules bound, but just his approach and his preaching style. And Mom was an evangelist in the church, and she also was a high school English and French teacher. We didn't have everything we wanted, but we had pretty much everything we needed. A lot of love. All 6 of us shared that 1-bathroom house. Till one point we converted the garage into a den so we'd have more space. And I learned how to be a handyman, helping Dad do that with the insulation, the floorboards, the wall covering, the heaters. So it was a good time growing up. When I first started school, it was a very segregated school in the 60s in Middle Tennessee. And I went to a school that was right across the fence from our house.
Oh my God.
It was a segregated school. After a few years, they started busing us to different schools to try to integrate the area to some extent. I'll never forget on the playgrounds, the school that I went to right behind our house across the fence, there was sewage that kind of seeped to the top. It was not present at the integrated school we went to. And even on the bus, initially the bus driver would call us names. It's primarily probably a 90% white area. But we lived through it, and there's that old saying, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. And I'm glad I understand that type of environment, understand that age. I'm glad I didn't have to live my whole life in it, but I'm glad I understood it.
And what about college? How did you decide to go to college?
That was always a given in our house. Mom and Dad kind of expected that we'd go to college. Mom had her master's. Dad went to Tennessee State. Both went to Tennessee State undergrad in Nashville. Dad didn't finish, just had a few hours his senior year, but he started working for DuPont. I think Mom, they had their first child, so he worked. 3 of us went to college and 1 didn't. When it was time for me to think about college, fortunately I had some options. I was very much into reading in school. I loved that stuff. I was fairly reserved growing up. Graduated first in my junior high school, first in my high school. And so I had scholarship offers. First, I was interested in UCLA because I loved watching college basketball, and John Wooden, UCLA's coach, that string of national championships he had, I loved it. Mom talked to me about going to a historically black university to kind of get that background, that history, and understand what it would be like in that environment. And I'm glad I listened to her. I ended up going to Howard University in Washington, D.C., and I loved it. I loved being in D.C. and loved going to Howard. Fortunately, it was on a scholarship, but for that, I would not have been able to go.
And you get into law?
I got into law when I was about age 12 or 13. In civics class, I remember reading about the Constitution and justice and equality, reading about history and over time how justice was often would triumph, not always, but it was always a goal of our society. And those themes, those concepts, those ideals drew me to the law. Because a lot of the time the path to justice is through enforcing legal rights and ensuring that everybody gets fair and equal treatment. So I knew probably in 8th grade or 9th grade I wanted to be a lawyer. And fortunately I was able to get there.
And how did you decide on which college you'd go to and which law school?
In college at Howard University, I had a professor who was, I think, the second woman to ever get her PhD, a black woman to get her PhD at Harvard. And she always talked about raising our horizons, expanding our horizons. Her black children need to raise their horizons, aim high. And she convinced me to apply for a scholarship called the Luard Scholarship to study in London or in Great Britain generally. I ended up picking the London School of Economics in London, England. So this country boy that grew up in the town of 1500 outside Nashville, Tennessee, then goes to D.C., which was a shock, and I adjusted. And then I'm in D.C., and the head of the honors program at Howard University convinces me to go overseas. So I land in, I think it was at Heathrow Airport, as I recall, and I was green as could be. I had a great experience and learned a tremendous amount, not just about studies, but about myself, about people, about history, about society. Great experiences. Had some great role models, people pushing me along, encouraging me to shoot for the stars. I will say, when I was in high school, it became apparent that I was going to graduate first in my class. Two teachers thought that was not a good idea. We never had a black valedictorian at that high school. Most of the teachers and students were fine, but a couple didn't think it was a good idea. And notwithstanding that, you persevere, work hard, push through, and Mom's praying the whole time for you, and Dad too. So they didn't stop me.
So how did you get to the highest court in Texas? That in itself is historic.
Well, there's some themes here in what I've been talking about. One is encouragement of parents and role models along the way. The other is work hard and study. Another is God's had His hand, I think, on my life because I was pretty naive growing up. I've grown up a lot in the last 30 years, as you can imagine. So I'm getting ready to look at law schools and thinking, I need to aim high. So I applied to what practitioners at large law firms consider to be the toughest law school in the country, University of Chicago Law School. I thought about Ivy League law schools, but I decided I wanted to go to the University of Chicago. Got in. It was tremendously hard, and I appreciate that. But I only applied to 2 law schools, University of Chicago and Vanderbilt Law School. Either one of them, or both, could have said, no, you're not admitted. Even if you had the best scores in the country, they're that competitive. But I only applied to 2. Again, because I was from the country, nobody in my family had been a lawyer before, and I didn't know you're supposed to apply to 8 or 10. A handful of schools that are, they call them gimmies, I'm going to get into because they're good law schools, but I'm good enough to get into. 2 or 3 at the very top of the heap, and then some in the middle. I only applied to 2 at the top. Fortunately, I got into both of them, and I went to University of Chicago Law School because it offered me the larger scholarship, so I could afford to go. As it turns out, law is a profession that has puts a lot of importance on pedigree. And if you go to a great law school, that stays with you your whole career. It opens doors your whole career, not just because of the alumni network, but because you went to that particular law school. And that paved the way for a lot of things. After law school, I worked at a law firm in Nashville. I was the first black lawyer they ever hired. The firm had been around over 60 years. When I was looking at, after 2 years of being in Nashville, moving to Texas to practice, I could interview with any firm because my pedigree, again, God had his hand on me to get into these two law schools. And even to this day, occasionally someone will ask, where'd you go to law school? Initially, I'm taken aback a little bit because I've accomplished a few things. And where I went to law school 34 years ago or so, maybe shouldn't be that important, but it still comes up. And again, that just law places that kind of emphasis on historical pedigree, and you can go as far as you want from any law school if you work hard enough, but that law school pedigree can play a big role in opening doors. So that helped. I'm working at, when I moved to Texas, a large, very well-heeled law firm in Houston. It had a lot of Texas connections. A number of senior partners at that firm knew the governor's family, Governor Bush, George W. Bush, when I was coming along. And I got this question whether I was interested in being a judge. And that was after I'd been practicing about 11 years. And then the director of appointments for the governor called me and asked if I was interested in being a judge. And I was enjoying practicing law. I really enjoyed it. And I said, well, I'm flattered, thank you for the call. And essentially said, no, thank you. And the voice on the other end said, really? And I said, well, I'm enjoying what I'm doing. I love it. I never thought about being a judge before. And the appointments director said, well, at least will you think about it? I said, okay, I'll think about it. I'm flattered, I'll think about it. So I thought about it and decided there's really no downside. If I'm appointed, at that point it was to be a trial judge in district court in Houston, then I would have all that experience handling disputes and cases, more than you could ever get as a lawyer on an annual basis, and you'd be known as a judge the rest of your life. I said, there's not much of a downside at all. The downside was the compensation. Government comp versus private compensation. So I remember telling my wife, this is a great opportunity, I think I want to take it, submit my name. And she kind of looked at me, she's an accountant. I said, well, there is a downside. The compensation is a little bit different. She frowned. I said, okay, compensation is a lot different, but I'm only going to do it 3 or 4 years. Then I'll go back to private practice. She said, I'm supportive, whatever you want to do. Well, the 3-year plan turned into a 13-year plan. After getting appointed to the district court bench in Harris County and handling many, many cases, huge cases, and small cases, I got a call from the next governor, Rick Perry's appointments director, asking if I wanted to serve on one case in the Texas Supreme Court. If a justice has to recuse from a case on the Supreme Court because of a conflict, then depending on the circumstances, the governor can appoint one person from any district court or court of appeals bench in Texas to serve on the Supreme Court for that one case. You can't campaign for it because you don't know there's an opening, and I got the call. And I thought, and I think I asked the appointments director, there's hundreds of judges out there, how'd you find me? So we have a process, we found you. Would you like to serve on this case? So I was appointed to serve on the Supreme Court while I was a trial judge. I think I'd been a trial judge 1 year, maybe 2, and loved that service and decided I was going to run for the Texas Supreme Court, the next opening on the court. And that came up a year and a half later, and so I ran for the Texas Supreme Court and was elected in 2002, then re-elected in 2008, and ended up serving almost 10 years on the Texas Supreme Court. An additional honor I'm very flattered about is there had never been an African American to get elected to the Texas Supreme Court when I ran. And some friends of mine said, "What? You can't run for the Supreme Court. What are you doing? It's never happened in Texas." And I told him, you got to believe. You got to believe there's a purpose, and then work your rear end off to get there. And we made history. Now, Wallace Jefferson was elected the same year. He'd been appointed the year before, so he got to the Supreme Court by appointment. And he's the first African American to serve on the Supreme Court. I was the first to get there by election. So we had 2 African Americans, and we got there both ways, by appointment and by election. So we made history.
So you two were serving at the same time?
We were. I retired after about 10 years from the court. He served another year, and I told him when he retired, I said, "You just couldn't work there without me. You just missed it, didn't you?"
Right.
We had a good laugh about it.
So are there any others? Have there been any others after?
Only the 2 of us. But while we were there, we had the most diverse Supreme Court in the nation, I believe. We had 2 African Americans. We had 2 Hispanics. Eva Guzman, who's still there, actually, and David Medina, who's not on the court any longer. And at one point, I believe we had, don't quote me, four women total on the court as well. But there was no Supreme Court in the nation, I think we checked at the time, that was as diverse as our Supreme Court. And we were proud of that. Mostly proud that we did good work. We meted out justice. We followed the law fairly for everybody. But we're also proud of the fact that we're getting that job done. It's very diverse. We're going to run everybody out of here.
That's the answer to the question. Yeah. Is the product, so that's key for me, marketing.
So obviously, that is one of those things at this point that you and Jefferson had that no other judge in Texas. So how does that feel? I mean, how does that feel being, you are history. You're a walking history.
Yeah. I don't wake up in the morning feeling like I'm walking history. I wake up in the morning thinking I've been blessed and privileged to do some things that are phenomenal. I really enjoyed. Served the people of Texas in hopefully tremendous ways. That's the way I see it. The fact that there was a glass ceiling that had not been punctured before, that was just a hurdle along the way. We all surmount hurdles along the way. That's the way I see it.
So what's different? What's different about you than other judges who have the same pedigree, the same background? How is it that you were able to rise to the top?
I think I'm a pretty decent guy. I've got some good qualities. Still working on parts of me too. I think it's a combination of things. One is listening to mom and dad and studying hard, learning to love learning, love writing, love studying. To this day, if you ask me what's the favorite part of my job, being an appellate lawyer, handling large, complex commercial disputes, not at the trial court, but in the courts of appeals and the Supreme Court, state and federal. My favorite part is reading, taking in a court opinion with my highlighter, 7 o'clock at night, reading it, highlighting it, tearing it apart, understanding it, and figuring out how to apply it to help my clients. I'm academically oriented. I did come out of my shell. I think I said I was reserved growing up in college and then after that. So I enjoyed talking with the visiting people. That was an advantage because you have to be elected in Texas. If you can't give a speech, can't interact with people, then I think it's going to be hard. I think another reason that I was blessed to get to, let's call it the pinnacle of the profession by serving on the Supreme Court, it's because I think I'm a pretty genuine person. And I think voters, by and large, they listen to what you say, they analyze it, but the bottom line is, when they leave that meeting or after your conversation with them, do they have that warm fuzzy? Do they know you mean what you say and you're going to do what you say, and you're a good person who loves our country. And I think people see that because that's who I am. And maybe the biggest part of it is there's a purpose for all of us, and I think that purpose was there before me, and I followed the route, got there. God's purpose.
That's the market exactly where you go.
What is a challenge that may have changed the trajectory of your life, or is there one thing or that may have happened in your life that changed who you are or who? And if it's not
more precise. And hence when we talk about doing messaging,
or how
There-
about
without the precision, it's going to be hard to do that. Which also then to me as a product guy as well, if you don't define
One of the
precision,
two answers to that, one more direct than the other. My grandfather worked hourly for Ford and loved it. He would talk about from time to time wanting to be a lawyer, and he never saw me become a lawyer. He died before I went to law school. But I remember at a young age him mentioning that. That may have had something to do with me wanting to become a lawyer. That probably contributed to changing where I was headed in life. The other thing I'll mention is, and this is something I tell the next generation, I won't call them kids because some of them are teenagers and young adults, and that is whatever you do it like it's important and it's your personal task. It's not something somebody gave you to just finish. It's important to get it right. Whether it's a job or a task, do a great job at it. Do your best. Make it excellent, because that'll open doors. People know who gets the job done. And then when someone calls you, or when there's an opportunity and they call you, then you'll have folks around you saying, that person does a great job, and open doors. And you'll get to take advantage of something that maybe you didn't expect, or take that next step up the ladder. And then do a good job there too. Do your best. And then that'll open the next door. I read a book a long time ago about Fortune 500 CEOs, and they all said several things, but applicable to your question, they said, when I look back on my life, I never planned this. What I didn't expect I'd be where I am. Like I said, I never planned on being a judge. But they all said, you do a great job because that opens doors and word gets around, and that then creates the next opportunity to take the next step up that ladder. And so I tell young people, that's what you need to do. The other thing I tell them is, there's two people in the world that always know everything you do and everything you're planning to do and everything you've done. It's God and you. So when you get up in the morning, you're putting on your makeup or shaving or brushing your teeth, and you see somebody in the mirror, make sure you respect the person you see, because you know what you've done, what you're planning to do, what you're doing now. Make sure the big guy is proud of all three of those. Yep.
What would you say is your purpose in life?
My purpose in life. Top priority is follow God's will. That's top priority. It takes some work. We're human. Purpose otherwise to keep working on your marriage, keep it good. It takes work. Very little happens by accident that's good. A lottery maybe, but very few things other than that. Another thing is be a role model and provide good guidance for my kids. And beyond that, try to help others. And there are a lot of different ways I do that, but try to help others.
Oh my God, and also the way they talk about
How do you think people will
this is
remember
how I
you?
judge these people sometimes. I've not told this to anybody.
Let me answer that with how I hope people remember me, because I don't know how they'll remember me. I hope they'll remember me as somebody who
I heard this from a lot. You know why we sell? Price.
I'm gonna pause for a minute.
Okay, you have a problem. You're gonna lose that differentiator. See, like, so they lead with that. Yeah. They lead. They feel.
I hope people remember me as a good person who was God-fearing, who was driven, worked hard to accomplish things they wanted, but was always willing to help others. There's that saying that nice guys finish last. That's wrong. Nice guys finish first when they work for it and follow the path that's set out for them.
Last question. What do you like to do in your leisure time?
Leisure time. I like to read. I like to travel with my wife. One day I'm going to be a good golfer. I like to golf, but golf takes a lot of time. It's hard to fit it in. I'm still looking for that client that plays a lot of golf so I can get out on the golf course. And one of the most favorite things I like to do in my leisure time is hang out with the family. The kids, wife, family, just nothing like it.
But I'm also talking like Will. In fact, Will is a business analyst.
Got it.